Welcome to our viewers and listeners from around the world. My name is Jim Thompson. I'm broadcasting live and direct from Washington, D.C. I want to welcome you all to the fourth week of Shelter Sounds, which is a weekly program featuring conversations with professional musicians from their homes in the United States. Shelter Sounds is produced by the Forum for Cultural Engagement and the American Center in Moscow, in coordination with the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. The group Miramar are in Richmond, Virginia. They are musicians that play bolero music with Miramar. We have 4 members from the group today. I want to welcome them. Welcome you guys. Laura Ann Singh, who is on vocals and percussion. We have Ray Alvarez and Marlysse Simmons. Ray is the singer, plays percussion as well, songwriter. Marlysse Simmons on keyboards and composer and arranger. And we have Justin Riccio, who plays percussion, and I think that's it, right? Unless he sings backup vocals, but
thanks.
Yeah. So anyway, welcome guys. It's great to have you here. I want to talk to Laura Ann first. Laura Ann, hello.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
How are you?
Great.
Laura Ann, I want you to introduce this video we're about to see, which will introduce the group to all our listeners. So do you want to tell us about what we're getting ready to watch?
Yes. When we were putting together a program for the Russia tour, Marlysse ran across some really beautiful Russian music from the same time period that a lot of the original music that we started covering when we started Miramar years ago, 50s and 60s era music from Latin America, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Mexico. Researching some of that music that was coming out of Russia at the same time, this one composer kept coming up a lot, and she's a woman, which is a little bit rare for popular music especially, and her name is Aleksandra Pakhmutova. And we chose this song that I don't know, that there were a lot of versions of it online that we found. The first one that we kind of fell in love with was Maya Krystalinska, excuse me. And she was the first recording of that song, and then it's been covered over and over. It's a really, really popular song. Culturally, we found out in Russia as people sang along with us when we would do the song. One thing that makes it really unique, I think, is that as it was translated into other languages due to its popularity, it was usually the original Russian poetry was erased, and they wrote love songs. The song is really about an astronaut who leaves Earth, and the Earth like longing for it. So it's a love song between the Earth and the astronaut. And we did a Spanish translation, Ray did, and he kept that meaning intact. So it's a little bit different than the other foreign language translations of this song you might hear. And then we did it in Russian. So excuse our Russian people. We love your language. We're still figuring it out, getting our mouths around it, but it's so beautiful. We wanted to do it in Russian as well. So this is called Нежность, which means tenderness.
Sin ti
Wow, beautiful. You guys, that was beautiful. So that's kind of a Major Tom kind of situation there with the theme, right? Astronaut expressing this love for the planet, the home.
Yeah, it's more the Earth crying for the astronaut who has left.
Okay, so a little role reversal
The Earth
there.
remembers him with tenderness, so the stars treat him with tenderness as well.
And so beautiful. It's very poetic. I mean, I didn't understand the lyrics, but you know, this highlights the sort of transcendental power of music to convey these feelings, you know. So
yeah, that's what first grabbed us, was the beautiful arrangement. It's just so gorgeous, and you know, first few times I heard a song, I just cried right through it without even knowing what they were talking about.
yeah. So yeah, I want to take that sentiment and kind of segue into Miramar and the band. And, you know, if one of you could tell us about the name and the origin of the group and, you know, the repertoire. It's a bolero group, and you play this music. If it's either you do the covers or the originals, and they kind of harken back to this era. We sort of look at it as a golden age of romantic music. Really, you don't hear it. Romantic music is not really super popular anymore. I mean, everybody has feelings about it. But can one of you talk to me about the band? And
romantic music is still popular, but it's a different kind of romance.
Right.
I'll just quickly say how the band started. Basically, Justino, myself, you as well, and Ray, there's a band that we all part of called Ritmo, which is a 10-piece salsa band. And Ritmo is a salsa band that plays dance-heavy party music. And occasionally we play boleros. And out of that project, Ray and I we really enjoyed the moments we had in Ritmo to perform boleros, slower songs, basically. And Ray is from Puerto Rico and had a vast collection of old vinyl, and grew up hearing these songs from his family, and I as well. And everybody in the group is familiar with this style of music, and we were just drawn to it. So the two of us just started thinking about it, really, just thinking about what can we do. And then in the meantime, I had another project with Laura Ann doing. Laura Ann does Brazilian Bossa Nova, which is popular sort of the same time period. I mean, a little later, I guess, but basically Bossa Nova and boleros and salsa. It's all coming from these. We were all feeling the same thing, and we decided to, we had a moment where all of a sudden we had the opportunity for Laura Ann to sing a duet, and it was like an explosion because it was the most beautiful thing. And then that's how Miramar started. And that was with Ray and Laura Ann duet, me on piano, and Justino on bongo.
Beautiful. Ray, can you talk a little bit about the bolero, like in your family life? Like a lot of people I know from Latin America, South America, you talk about boleros and like, oh yeah, Sunday afternoons, my grandmother would play that. I'd hear boleros, wafting through the walls. Is there something to that? Like,
yeah, basically the bolero is from Cuba. The bolero is a particular rhythm. And it's, I think, the reason it became so infectious, and the reason that it eventually became the quintessential romantic musical expression of Latino America, is because the bolero found a way to deliver a romantic song with a very infectious rhythm to dance to. A lot of people, especially nowadays when we play boleros, they feel like it's a music that you sit down and watch. Most romantic music, you're listening to the lyrics, you're listening to, the arrangement, the strings, whatever's carrying you through that voyage. But the bolero immediately grabs you and, hey, this is time to dance, you know. So because of that, where I grew up in Puerto Rico, it was always part of any any family event. You know, even when you go to the restaurant on Sunday with your family, boleros are going to be playing. You know, early in the morning where you go to the corner coffee shop to get your coffee, a bolero is going to be playing on the radio. You know, salsa is for the beach. Salsa is for, like, you know, after work, you're having your drinks. But the bolero, you know, I grew up with my mother playing, there was always a record on the turntable. And it was always, you know, so it just becomes a part of how we think and how we feel about things, you know. When you're getting a party together with friends, you think about all that. You think about the lighting, does it look good in here, you know, and then you think about the music. So in Latino America, at one point, throughout most of Latino America, it was the quintessential expression of romance through music. And now Miramar is coming from the point of view where that influenced the rest of the world. If we think about 60s and 70s romantic music, a lot of the same instruments were going around and being used, and a lot of the same musical sentiment, musical expression. You know, you hear chords, I hear chords in Japanese 60s romantic music that I hear in Greek 60s romantic music, or Brazilian 60s, you know, so there was a communication that it's a kind of impressive when I think about it, because there was no internet. There was no global communication. You know, people were on a boat, on a plane, sharing the music, inspiring, and it was being shared on that level, which I think is makes a more permanent impression upon a people and the music that they're playing. So the bolero is, for me, that influential, that big of a thing worldwide.
I mean,
Yeah.
they just, you know, for anyone who might not, well, the bolero, most famous bolero song around the world is Bésame Mucho. And you can find a version of Bésame Mucho in every language around the world. And I'd say in all the places we've traveled around the world, that is the song that people want to hear if they aren't familiar with boleros, because that's the song that connects them to this music. And Bésame Mucho was written by a female composer from Mexico, I think in the 40s. So, I mean, that's a long time ago, and it was by the 60s. It was already had been recorded internationally, you know.
Yeah, and Laura Ann, you have a Brazilian group on the side, or you know, you do a lot of covers of Brazilian music. There's a bolero component in a lot of that music as well, right?
Absolutely. Like as early as the mid 50s, when right before kind of a bossa nova exploded, which had a similar kind of effect on the world. You know, you hear bossa nova in all genres all across the world from that time period. Luis Bonfá, João Donato, these guys were writing boleros in Portuguese and playing bolero. So the rhythms were, I mean, they're similar, you know, they have a lot of cross-pollination there anyway, just because of the cultural roots that were being traded around for the couple of centuries before that, of the people that were brought there, that came there. So yeah, bolero had already kind of, like when Ray talks about Latino America, like Brazil is definitely included in that as far as being like embracing the sound of the bolero. It's there all over the place in that time period, especially.
Yeah, cool. And Justin, the music as a percussionist, bolero has a kind of rhythmic unit that defines it, right? Like the actual bolero rhythm. Like I know a lot of salsa bands, old salsa records, you'll have all this burning, you know, you'll have a shredding salsa set, and there's always one bolero. I don't know if it's to give everybody a break, you know, for a minute, but it slows everything down, cools it off for a minute. Can you speak to the rhythmic component of it that made sort of help, you know, you hear it and you go, it's a bolero?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because every salsa band, at least back in the 90s when we were touring constantly across the US, people would want to hear merengue that way too. Like you remember this, Jim?
Yeah.
we'd give them one merengue song, even though we really didn't want to.
Yeah.
Bolero is a different sort of I mean, I actually enjoy bolero music very much, and there's a big difference between when you hear a salsa band play bolero and when you hear a trio that, you know, that's their music and they play it, like, rhythmically as well. There are nuances that even the best salsa musicians can't quite capture in bolero music. But when I hear the great trios from Mexico, Puerto Rico, or Cuba, and they play bolero, it's like when you listen to changui, you know, and you hear it's a different thing. It's not salsa, it's not son exactly. There are just these subtle nuances that they capture, and especially with the bongos. If I'm playing the bongos with Miramar, I try my best to sort of emulate the older sound of the way the bongo players would play, where you're sort of in and out of the rhythm, and you never want to it's not like you're soloing, but you're accentuating phrases and passages. And that's unique to bolero, I think. So it seems very simple because it's a 4/4, you know, straight ahead thing, but there are ways to play with it, like swing and jazz. You know, there are ways to kind of work inside the framework.
That's so cool. So it's like it's a malleable kind of form, and Miramar you guys are kind of like revivalists in a way, or continuing the tradition, allowing it to breathe and evolve. Obviously, you're like Borgs, you know, you're absorbing from your travels, and you know, you bringing that into your repertoire. I want to talk about your recent trip to Russia because I know it had a big influence on you guys. But I want to come back real quick to the name and what the name means. And also, Marlysse, I want you to tell us about the last full-length record you did. I know it's a tribute to one of the most famous bolero composers in all of Latin America. Can somebody talk about the name and that inspiration?
I came up with the name just, I only say that because it's Miramar is a neighborhood in Puerto Rico in the San Juan area. But Miramar is also, when you
translate
it means look, see, like see the ocean. You know, literally is mira, like the imperative of look, and then ocean, which is mar.
That would be a very desirable neighborhood to live in.
Yeah, well, so happens, which I was getting to, Miramar, when you say the word Miramar, it can be a proper name, or it can be like saying the word overlook. Anywhere you can stand and see the ocean, you're standing on a Miramar. So that's the name. And I thought it would be something nice to name it Miramar, not only because it's something, not only because I feel the ocean is a very romantic place and a place of reflection and that kind of thing, but also because to add a bit of familiarity for the people that I thought would be listening to our music. When we first started, we were concentrating on Puerto Rican style boleros. So I wanted something familiar, to Puerto Ricans, to people of Latino America, because anywhere you go in Latino America, there's a Miramar. There's a Miramar street, there's a song, there's a band, there's a restaurant. Now, one small mistake, or maybe a big mistake of mine, was not foreseeing that when you look up Miramar, a zillion things come up. Yeah. So we tell people, look up Miramar Boleros. But I think I still think it's a good name. And, and also a good thing about the name Miramar is I always wanted to have something international about our group. Even though we were concentrating on boleros, part of why we got together was our love of romantic music worldwide, especially from the 60s and 70s. So to have a name like Miramar is kind of vague in a way. And I just wanted to kind of set the plate for future aesthetics that we were going to incorporate into the music, keeping the spirit of the bolero, the spirit of the romance, but we wanted to do a little bit of Greek romance. We wanted to do a lot of Brazilian romance.
Now we want to do Russian.
Now we want to do Russian romance, all that stuff, but we can only conquer one language at a time. So.
Right on.
But yeah, Miramar, there it is.
Marlysse, can you tell us about that, the Puerto Rican composer, the woman who is a huge inspiration to you guys?
Yeah. So, and we were starting out, as Ray mentioned, we were doing a lot of covers because we also are, all of us are composers and we write our own songs, but the group started performing mostly with covers, and we started to realize that a lot of the covers we had were by a certain composer. Her name was Sylvia Rixach. We also started to realize how important she was, and then on our choices, Ray and I go to Puerto Rico every year. We started to do research in Puerto Rico, meeting with people, talking about her, and just trying to find out as much as we could, by being actually there on the island. A long story short, Sylvia Rixach is extremely well known and popular in Puerto Rico. She didn't live a very long life, and she also was not a front woman. She was, but she didn't put out, there aren't many albums out. She only really officially has one album released by the Cultural Institute of Puerto Rico. And I think that's why her name kind of gets overlooked by people who are in the, who talk about bolero music, because if you go look up bolero music, you don't necessarily find information about Sylvia unless you're looking in the,
or the creators.
Yeah,
mostly the performers.
Unless you're looking within the Puerto Rican diaspora of music. But her music was covered by people around the world, and she was just kind of she was just this renegade lady who wrote music, wrote comedy. She acted. She was in the first female group that ever toured the island of a trio of just women. I mean, this lady was, she founded the first musician rights union in Puerto Rico for musicians. I mean, this lady was insane. I mean, she did so much. And there are people, who, so we worked with Barbès Records and Olivia Conan, who's very familiar with so many things Latin American. And when I introduced Olivia to Sylvia, he actually didn't necessarily know about her, and which is, really crazy because he knows everything. So but
he recognized a lot of the songs, of course.
Yeah, and so we kind of brainstormed on the idea to release an album in dedication to Sylvia. We featured 7 of her songs, and we did 3 of our original arrangements as well.
Beautiful.
And she is just, we continue to perform her songs and do new arrangements of her songs that haven't been released officially. But that's who she was.
Worth looking into.
I'm sorry.
Worth looking into. She is.
Yeah. She also wrote the lyrics then.
Oh yeah. Sylvia Rixach was considered herself and put herself in, more than anything, in a creator, place, because that's what she was, a creator. She performed, but only out of love. She didn't perform because that was her thing.
Yeah.
Her thing was creating the music, creating the lyrics, writing the lyrics, and she was very, we spoke to her daughter a lot, Sharon Riley, and according to her, she was really hardcore about the lyrics, about the all the words being said right. Because poetry, you change one little thing and the magic could be gone. So Sylvia Rixach was very meticulous as a creator.
Beautiful. I noticed there's your percussion, you have bass, you have piano, you have and in this last video we showed, and on the record, and I know when you toured in Russia, you had string arrangements. You had a kind of mini orchestra. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, some credit for the amazing violin player that's in that video we just watched, and that you had strings really kind of bring out the Kleenex, like
Well, this woman here is responsible for the arrangements, and she has a beautiful relationship with the young lady in the video, which is Justino's wife, and one of the most talented musicians we've ever had the honor of working with. And she's very proactive in the classical music scene, and really branches out with her music, and they have a great relationship.
What's her name?
Ellen.
Ellen.
Ellen Cockerham Riccio is who we use. She's part of our string quartet that we use in Richmond. And we had, when I remember when we first discussed touring Russia, I was surprised that I didn't know how it was going to come together with strings. I mean, we're already 6 people. Miramar is already 6. And I know that's really pushing it as far as a large group to tour. And we were so happy that we had the opportunity to play with different string players from philharmonics, local philharmonics. So like the first show we had in Samara, we had the local philharmonic orchestra, and it had the all women string quartet who played with us. And we don't, we couldn't speak to them. I think one of them spoke some English, but it was our first show. We were so nervous, and
Gatova, that's the word we learned. Remember, that was ready. We learned how to say ready so that we could start the songs. Gatova.
Yeah. Gatova.
And then also in Moscow we had an opportunity to play with amazing string players, and then also in where was it? Not Novosibirsk. Krasnoyarsk. We had the number Krasnoyarsk Philharmonic play with us, who were really extra special to us, and showed us around their home, and they were just amazing musicians. And I gave them the music and explained to them the sentiment, and they it was just such a great opportunity. I knew we were going to play in Russia, but it was so extra special to have to interact with other musicians and play with musicians, and to introduce them to this music, because they hadn't played this type of music before.
It's so cool. So let's talk about Russia. I know that you guys were just recently there. The world's pretty much turned upside down since your tour. But can you talk to us about Russia, and the tour, and what the experience was like? I mean, I know you've mentioned it. You had a lot of opportunities to play with incredible Russian musicians, and you were taken care of by Russian hosts. I saw the pictures. I followed the tour. It looked amazing. I think I wanted to be there. It's like they opened up their doors and hearts to you guys. So the tour, if you could tell us a little bit about it, how it came about and how long it was, places you visited, that would be great. It looked like you played some amazing places too, like kind of state of the art.
I'll let Bryan and Justino talk about the places we played and the food we ate and all this.
Yeah, so tell me, when did the tour start, and how long was it? And just talk a little bit about it, please.
We started in February. We went a few days early so that we could experience Moscow, because it seems crazy to go that far and not get a few days off to just orient yourself and experience as much as you can when you're going that far. And it's complicated travel, visas and everything like that. So we went a few days early to just do everything we could.
And Maslenitsa.
And oh yeah, it was Maslenitsa. You have to talk about that.
No, that's fine.
Justin was our resident historian, but when I was in college and later, I was obsessed with the Russian literature in translation, obviously. And so I was really, really excited to experience Russia. I'd read about where they have poetry readings in squares where people will come and listen to poets for hours. And I really felt like, of all the places that we could go, Russia might be a place that gets what Miramar is trying to do. Mm. And I felt like that happened over and over again. Like every time we played Nежность, people really did start crying and singing along. People were engaged with the the material, even though Spanish is very, very foreign to a lot of Russians, like there's not a lot of cross pollination there. So they don't have like English is much more at the ready, more understandable. And as far as poets go, I mean, Sylvia Rexach was just, you know, she takes a metaphor and she just plumbs it. She doesn't stop going back to it. She's not like, you're the wind beneath my wings, you're the clouds in the sky. You know, she takes one idea and she keeps going back to it. So you have these really profound songs. The poetry is profound. And the same thing was true with this Nежность. It's the same exact thing that's so compelling. When you have amazing poets writing lyrics, it makes the songs matter so much more. And there was some sort of connection, I felt like that happened, like, you know, spiritually with that, because I feel like the Russian audiences that came to see us, at least, were like primed. They were like ready to get what we were doing, even though there was cultural and language barriers. It was like none of that mattered. So for me, that was by far the most exciting and beautiful thing about being in another place. I mean, there was so much good food. Justin like had done so much research before we went. So he knew about the history of every place we were in. He knew about the local. We went early actually because of the festival that was going on. What, Maslenitsa, Justin?
Yeah, that was great. I don't remember. No, I do. It was, yeah, we all love experiencing the culture, whether it's going to West Virginia, New York City, or Russia. I mean, we want to take it all in. But I know that we were all especially excited about going to Russia because, as Laura Ann said, I think we really expected that although you may not assume they would be into bolero music and the lyrics of Sylvia Rexach, for instance, I think we all understood that they share something in common. The depth of their willingness to feel both the painful, beautiful, happy, sad, you know, all at the same time. That's how I kind of feel about it. Life is just all those feelings all at once, you know.
Like soul music.
And the music embodies that. The music, just like Justina just said, a big part of this romance is the relationship of happy and sad together. And it's a very, you know, it's bittersweet, you know, and the bolero and this romantic, you know, I think that when we went to Russia, they got it. They got that quality of romance because they have it in their culture.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's your theory on that? Like that why did you think they get it?
I think because, you know, just the music alone, the music, the chord changes, the arrangements, the melodies. I think the music, and I'm talking on a worldwide level, this romantic music of the 50s, 60s, 70s, shared an aesthetic idea of what a sad melody should be, what a romantic melody should be. And everybody did it in their own little way. But the point being, it's a universal language. You know, of course, they say that about love, but that's exactly what it is. Romance, even the expression of romance, is a universal language. So it doesn't matter if what language I'm listening to. I'm going to understand because I'm concerned with that kind of romance. And if you grew up with this kind of romance, like Russia and all these other countries that have this beautiful legacy of romantic music and expression through poetry, whatever else, you're going to get it. You know, it doesn't matter what the language, you're going to understand the feeling. You know, when I was listening to Nежность first, and I was like, wow, I was crying. Go. The baby just fell, sorry.
Hey, that on a cue from you, Lauren, maybe you can translate this for us because I feel like it encapsulates that meaning of the Portuguese word saudade, I think.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
what it is? And what
That's-
is it?
It's saudade is the longing, but it's often longing or like homesickness, but it's not just about a place. It can be for a person, it can be for a time, but it's that sense of familiarity that you long for. And sometimes it's things that you haven't even experienced. Maybe you can have saudade for something you don't know, but you want it. It's that eternal kind of thing in all of us that you long for something, and that connection. So, and Brazilian music is full of that. I mean, all of it is the like here para não chorar. You laugh so you don't cry, because it's all together. It's all you have. It all comes as a unit. You don't get to pick and choose. And if you do, then your experience is impoverished, right? So, I feel like that Russian people as a whole. I mean, of course, we're going to generalize a little bit, but like the way we experienced Russians they were extremely open and kind. They were courteous to us, like we were obviously foreigners, and people were incredibly hospitable. They were funny. They have a great sense of humor. There's a sense of like a little bit of the absurdity of suffering and all the crazy history that I think that Russians have lived, that you have to keep some sense of levity through it so that you can keep connecting and keep living. And so I mean, again, these are grand generalizations, but we didn't really know how we would be received. When we were in France, people are fine and lovely, but like there's not a welcoming, and in Russia there's a welcoming for sure. I
was going to ask you more about that, because I know that you guys stayed in people's homes. A lot of professional musicians are touring all the time. They go straight to the hotel. They know a city by the little bar in the lobby of the hotel. Some people are not so curious to go out and try the local flavor. And I know all of you guys, because I know you're not that kind of touring musician, and you want to go out there and absorb and experience, what people living there are experiencing. So Russia's 11 time zones worth of land, and I mean that's incredible. And so in your travels there, how many of those time zones were you in? And can you, I mean, I know we're kind of talking about this anyway, but like you said, people opened up their hearts and their homes to you. Tell me like about a night, or some, experience, like you play a show, you're loved and embraced, and then they take you out. And I mean, did that happen?
Sure it did. Justino, tell them about Julia.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I was about to. There's a tradition in Russia that I know about, and not only Russia, but it's very popular in Russia. Bread and salt, and so this is going back centuries. When you're a guest in someone's house, they present you with bread and salt, and I think it's kind of obvious, but the bread is meant to it symbolizes, that they're willing to give you the food that they have for nourishment. And the salt is, especially back in the old days, there was almost like currency, so it's the ultimate sign of generosity. And it's a beautiful, I just think of it as a beautiful concept. And we experienced that a lot. Julia was someone that Marlysse actually sent me one night before we left the U.S. She sent me, I think it was Airbnb, right? She has a thing called Lovely Moscow Tours. And Marlysse was thinking we should get in touch with Julia because she might be able to show us around. She seemed like really cool and in touch with what we would.
Because her specific thing was about food, and that's what we
all. Right. So we got excited.
You
We
guys
got
are
really
all
excited.
gourmands, yeah.
Yeah, well, we love to eat, and so I contacted her before we left, and I had reached out to a number of people I just found on Instagram and Facebook, just to make sure that we because none of us really had friends there, to make sure that there were people that like-minded that we might be able to hang out with, and she was by far like the one who just immediately wrote back and said, I'd love to take you guys around. And it was never, even though she has a business and she works really hard and she's a natural at it, she just wanted to show us around as friends right away. It was great. So we actually had a wonderful meal at her house, her and her husband Dennis, and where they made everything, from scratch. And it was all traditional Russian, a little bit Georgian, a little bit Siberian, but all Russian food. It was amazing. And then she ended up showing us around Moscow for like 3 days.
Correct.
But you have to pay. We might not have to pay, but everybody else should pay.
Yeah.
But no, she was the best. And but that was all around Russia. Ray can probably elaborate on the story in what was it, Chinks, with the gentleman backstage.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Why not?
That evening was especially special for me because I had this one member of the backstage who was looking for the singer. And as soon as he found me, he was like, get back here,
I didn't get invited. I just want to say.
I kept calling it the boys' club because it was kind of like the boys' dressing room where this was happening. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it was inappropriate for a lady to be back there. I have no idea. But it took me back in this room where it was just props and the most beautiful things just hanging around, puppets. There was a big bust of Lenin probably used in some performance. The moon and all these things. And it was beautiful. And back there, you just had a little table and a little bit of drink that he had made, distilled himself. And a wonderful tradition, which was a bit of fat back, and just slices and some homemade bread. And for me, I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry because
I think you did.
I think I did cry. But it was just one of the most welcoming things. This guy didn't know me. He didn't know us. He didn't know our music. But there it was, this beautiful welcoming, And right now, I'm going to go away from that and think about, remember that time, Laurent and Marlysse, when we were at the subway? And we were kind of wondering what to do. This line had stopped running, and they chased Marlysse and Laurent out of this car. And we were like, okay, well, let's remake. And here comes this guy who happened to hear us speaking English. He's like, hey, do you need any help? I understand English. What's going on? Let me help you. And those things were happening all the time.
We were lost.
Yeah.
Nowhere else that we've traveled, even though we've had beautiful treatment and company and everything, nowhere else has, our host has always been gracious. Our hosts are everywhere. But never anywhere else has everybody been so welcoming. Everybody been so nice. Even people on the street. In New York, you're afraid to ask for directions because they're going to look at you and keep walking. But in Russia,
I'll help you.
yeah, but you have to pick. In Russia, it just felt a lot more welcoming.
Yeah, that was in Moscow.
Yeah.
That was in Moscow. I mean, my most memorable moments were our tour managers, Dacha, and she had kind of a day off, a long day before we had to travel again. So we had time.
I cooked a 10-hour dinner.
Justin
It
cooked
took
a
about 10 hours to make that dinner.
we had to, go out to the countryside of Moscow. I guess the suburb. That's what you call it, right? Suburbs of Moscow, basically.
Yeah.
Or
No, it's like Dacheville.
Dacheville.
Yeah, it's like a place just for dachas in the country. It's like
Well,
not
Moscow is
suburb.
so huge. Moscow is so huge that when we left it, I felt like we were in another country or something.
Yeah.
But we definitely need to mention our tour manager, who was Masha, who was just a blessing for us. Such a blessing.
Yes.
We hit it off right away. And the rest of the tour, we just hung out as friends. And
Yeah.
she had a translator as a host. She was always there and always, keeping us in line because we get a little wild sometimes. We get a little too excited. And she was just a blessing to have, and probably the jewel besides Julia, the jewel of our company.
She was beautiful.
Well,
I know.
and then also the string players in Krasnoyarsk also really made a really special couple of days for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so nice. Yeah.
That was really amazing.
How many shows did you guys play, and what other cities besides Moscow did you perform in?
Well, we started off in our first show in Samara. Then we went back to Moscow. We were in Moscow a few days. Where did we go after that?
Then we went to
The
Siberia. We went to the Dacha. Then we flew to, I think it was Krasnoyarsk.
Krasnoyarsk, and
yeah.
then we played in Ajinsk, which was 3 hours outside of Krasnoyarsk.
Right.
And then we went
Novosibirsk.
to Novosibirsk.
Yeah.
And at that time, Novosibirsk. So, I mean, I stepped away for 2 seconds, but we talk about. So in the middle of this whole tour, I think it's kind of started when we, right when we're about to go to our final week in Siberia, that the coronavirus was taking down the world.
It was really bad in Western Europe at that point. It was getting really bad.
Western Europe, right? Because the U.S. was oblivious still and being stupid. So we were, but things started to get canceled in the U.S. So
Yeah.
South by Southwest, the biggest music festival that happens all year long. We got off the plane in Krasnoyarsk, I think it was, and we saw South by Southwest is going to be canceled, and that we couldn't believe it. And our other percussionist, who was supposed to be part of that festival, we felt so bad for him, but also just for such a big festival to be canceled, we started to sink in what was about to happen. Meanwhile, we were still able to play, and all of our shows except our last show that was supposed to happen at a university in Novosibirsk got canceled because that was basically the day that things started to shut down in Siberia. I think in Moscow it had shut down a few days earlier.
Yeah.
Jim, I think that I think when Trump announced that he was going to cancel all flights to Europe,
Yeah.
we had just landed and in I think it was 12 time zones away from home.
Yeah.
I think it was almost exactly 12 hours difference, like almost on the exact other side of the world. And we're like Marlysse said, like all this news is crashing in, and we're like almost as far as we could be from from getting home and wondering if we can get home. And it was a really bizarre time to be traveling.
Really bizarre. It's amazing that you pulled it off, and here you're back in the U.S. now. Everything's changed. I don't imagine you guys have played any gigs other than the living room there, right?
Yeah. I mean, so there was that last week of the tour. I mean, when we were in contact with the embassy and everybody who had organized the tour for us. Like, okay, what do you want to do? It was, for Ray and I, we were with our baby was with us. Desi was with us, so we were fine because we were all together. But for everyone else, it was a difficult decision because they weren't with their core family. And because our guitarist Sebastian was from New York, and New York was the place that it was exploding, obviously the most and getting very intense, he decided to leave a couple days early because because of the unknowns.
Yeah.
So he left from Krasnoyarsk. He didn't go to Novosibirsk with us. I mean, he just missed a few days, but it was like at that point he didn't, who knew what was going to happen 3 days later? So he decided to leave early. But since we were already there, flights were still happening. We wanted to stick it out.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to just take a few questions from people that are submitting questions. Vasily, one of the listeners, is asking, and I guess imagine that COVID-19 isn't around like normally. Is it hard being part of several musical bands at the same time?
it can be in high season when you're trying to organize like big shows that usually are organized, months or years, sometimes years out. You do have to take that into consideration. And I think personally, my priority though always falls on what opportunity might lead to a tour or shows that are abroad, and I definitely put my focus on that rather versus if it's just a show that's local, even though it might pay more. But I'm just because I just like to travel so much, so that's where I put my focus with whatever band might have the and so it's definitely not, neither band that I'm in has been working so hard at the same time, releasing an album at the same time. So you definitely try to make sure that's this band releases album now, and then you take turns so that you can keep the flow going. Lauren is in a few bands. She can talk about that.
Yeah.
I've always been I've until COVID, I've always been like more of a gigging musician, in the sense that I make money by performing, just like locally, regionally. And so when these other things pop up, like Marlysse was saying, definitely, there's definitely projects that are more fulfilling creatively.
Yeah.
So you always want to give as much attention and energy to those as you can. But for me, to just make it as a musician, I think you kind of have to have your fingers in a lot of pies, but where you focus that energy and how you view that. Like, I mean, for me, it's as a vocalist, it's hard for me to sit in my house and like do scales. I'm not going to practice that way. But if I have gigs, I'm singing a lot, and so it kind of functions several different ways for me that way.
Yeah.
But I don't know a lot of musicians that have the luxury of only being involved in one thing, because everybody's cobbling together in existence. So I think we're all used to working within those kind of limitations.
I think American musicians have been affected, or I wouldn't say it's a stigma, but the arts in general in America are very challenging for the artists and the practitioners. And so a lot of people I know, colleagues and myself included, have always, subsidized our livelihood with other gigs that a lot of times aren't even music gigs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Marlysse teaches, and somebody can give lessons and stuff, but to pay rent each month, it's a tough business. And I mean, I respect anybody that's trying to do it full time, especially now. A few more questions. I've got a question from Lubyov. And do you have a warm-up routine or exercise you do before each performance?
On a 5-mile jog before we start.
No. I mean,
two bottles of vodka.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably some traditions that are universal in there.
At least one bottle of vodka before performing.
Yeah.
I think there's you all don't have you don't do warm-ups, do you?
Don't speak with me.
You don't do warm-ups, do you? You do. Well, we always, I think through the sound check is sort of like.
I do a lot of warm-ups in my head.
Yeah, I think if we have to have a sound check. I mean, I guess there's been a few shows where there aren't sound checks, but ultimately the sound check is that moment to calm down, think about what's going to happen, and do the warm-up.
Yeah.
As sort of the band leader, I definitely maybe freak out a little bit on the way to a show, looking at the set list, thinking and trying to think about transitions. I probably should have a warm up rather than just freak out, but yeah.
I mean, I freak out of just nervousness, before any show. So sound check for me is a great way to kind of break the ice.
Right, and all the buildings are always different, the acoustics, and Well,
I used to have a thing where I used to have a thing where I had to do I had to work in certain exercises on my timbales, like when I was playing salsa music. I had to do these exercises on the drums, and if I didn't get to do it, I felt like I couldn't play.
I remember when you couldn't do it once.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like, and then I got over it. Then I was like, this is ridiculous.
yeah.
You know, you don't need this warm up all the time. It helps, but it's not necessary.
Yeah. So listen, my friends, we want to wrap it up soon, but I wanted to ask you, and you can all answer individually or not. So the Russian trip sounds amazing. So tell me, obviously, are you gonna maybe do some more Russian songs? What's, you know, the Russian trip obviously made a huge impression on you. So is that going to affect the future of Miramar? And what's happening? I mean, I know we're in this kind of shutdown period here, but what are you guys thinking about your present moment and the future for the group?
We're trying to release a new album. We're trying to figure out how we can actually record it. Uh-oh. Really? We have like almost a full album's worth of original material, and when we just have so many songs to choose from that we might, also put in there, including maybe another song from the Russian repertoire or the Nежность, or we also have, yeah, we kind of have too many things to choose from, so we're trying to organize, right, Lauren? Lauren and I were talking about it recently.
Yeah, I love what Ray said earlier about how like there's this like the standing on the edge of the sea, and you're always, that means you're facing what's out there, like the Miramar idea. And I think that's really good because we started being really and still are being really, really inspired by Sylvia Rexach and the music from Latin America. But I think our focus has been like, let's take the essence of that lyrically, like aesthetically, and move it through ourselves. Like, what is our expression of that? So that's kind of where we're going, which is definitely like more outward, more international, because like Ray said, we all have these influences that are really varied from all over the world. And so I feel like the Russia trip kind of helped solidify that we want to move it forward that way, in that there's a lot more to kind of discover and try to understand about this expression as we move forward, and not to get locked in like a bolero band kind of, we're not to do the same record again, I mean, to try to think how we can push it forward.
And technic, like specifically speaking, like with arrangements, we definitely have songs that we have strings on that we haven't recorded, but we also for we have drum set in a lot of songs that the first album did not feature drum set. Our second EP that we did a 45 with Daptone Records that actually featured, like, had a more of a groovy drum set thing, and we're sort of torn. We both worlds are what we like, so we're trying to figure out how to present that in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Stylistically, when the bolero came out of the 40s, 50s, and moved into the 60s, 70s, that's when you had a lot of different instrumentation going on, and that's when I think the musical communication worldwide happened. So I think we started out with more of a traditional bolero sound, which would be more 50s, early 60s, but then we would like to move, in our concern to adopt more of an international expression. We like to move more into 60s, 70s, when this romantic communication was happening, and it was a very beautiful time, and it was a brand new expression of romance. And it was also, I should say, a great way for these songs that have been around forever to have a second life. You know, these are songs that already were being heard by grandkids and stuff. But then when this new instrumentation, this new aesthetic came, these songs were being done all over again in a more upbeat kind of way, musically, but still with the same passion and sadness of the lyrics.
The bolero did kind of get, not exactly the kind you're doing, but there was another bolero. Wasn't there a Grammy nod for some bolero group a year or two ago in the US? It's a little bit different than the kind you do, Marlysse, right?
Oh, I guess pop bolero is what you call it.
Is that a thing now, or was it kind of last year?
Oh, it never dies. Bolero never dies. Yeah, still a thing.
Bolero never dies, but the newer bolero groups that you will hear, really are just kind of doing what was already done by the trios, by bolero groups. You know, they're not really expanding. It's kind of like salsa, like new salsa groups. They're not really expanding or cultivating the sound. You know, it's not evolving. It's just staying. They're keeping the formula.
Yeah, it's not experimental.
We're not formula people. We want to break out of that. So that's why we are all about the essence. Speaking of Miramar in particular, we are about the essence of romance, not so much a particular expression.
Yeah.
Of it.
Well, friends, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank Shelter Sounds for hosting this. You guys have anything you want to say on the way out to our Russian listeners and friends and anybody else?
Well, we're just grateful that we had the opportunity to do this today, and also grateful for the opportunity to everyone who made our trip happen, and to take care of us while we were there, and also the people who took care of us, extra care of us, to get home during the time that was extra crazy.
Yeah, Russia gave us the excitement, the passion, and the inspiration to definitely want to do it all over again.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
2021.
I have faith. Julia, we're coming back.
Masha,
we're coming back. We're coming back, Masha.
Okay, guys. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time, and good luck. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
thanks,
You too. Thanks, Jim. Thank you, Jim, for being the moderator today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.